Last year, as part of his Every Frame a Painting series, Tony Zhao released an excellent video essay titled The Marvel Symphonic Universe, in which he illustrated the flaws in not only the Marvel Universe's musical scores, but in most of blockbuster cinemas as well. The video opens with Tony interviewing strangers near downtown Vancouver, both his and my hometowns mind you, and asks them to hum the scores to different well-known cinematic properties. As expected, the people he interviews are able to easily recall the themes for James Bond, Harry Potter, Star Wars and such, as I'm sure you're probably hearing them in the back of your head as I mention them. But when the time came to recall the themes for Marvel films, which mind you are some of the biggest movies out there, all these people went silent. Well, except for
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out! Here comes Spider-Man.
Now, I won't be going into the topic of score and film music in particular, but it's an excellent video essay for which I'll leave the link in the description below. What struck me most about this video was how it appeared to scratch the surface of what I've always felt has been superhero films' biggest flaw, and that's a lack of identity. Now, each of these musical themes, as an element of the films that they represent, can be seen as an identifier for these films. We hear the music and we see the film and the characters linked to them. The musical score is part of that film's identity. But just like the majority of superhero films lack any discernible quality in their musical score to set them apart, so do the films themselves as character-based stories. While I'm sure most of us can agree that superhero films at the very least provide an entertaining time at the movie theater, from a filmmaking and storytelling standpoint, they often leave a lot to be desired. On one hand, both Hollywood and audiences seem to categorize them as belonging to one of two camps, each of which just so happen to pertain to one of the two major comic book companies. The lighter, more colorful fare of the Marvel Universe, and the darker, grittier, and, for lack of a better term, edgier films from the DC Universe, while the rest of them tend to fall somewhere to the sides.
Woo! Superhero landing! Yeah, that's really hard on your knees.
Totally impractical.
Both sides seem to have their own staple style, but they also come built in with immense storytelling shortcomings that stem from their single common goal, which is to create a unified shared universe. All the way back in 2008, when Marvel was about to launch their cinematic universe with Iron Man, it was something that had never been attempted before, and for it to be done for IP such as comic books, the likes of which are ripe with universes of their own, it presented several exciting opportunities for both audiences and storytellers.
And here we're poor, we're slaves, and here our parents never met, so we were never born. Here, the world ended in nuclear war. Here, no fish was ever brave enough to crawl up on land, and humans never evolved.
The shared universe has been the lifeblood of Marvel's business model since then. And since DC has only just started to build their own, only time will tell if anyone will come around who can do it better. However, while their overall universe is something impressive to behold, its individual parts, in this case the films themselves, have rarely proven to be anything more than serviceable.
Anyone else?
Out of the 16 shared universe films that Marvel has released to this date, it could be argued that only a handful of them have been truly great, while the rest are, for the most part, forgettable. Which brings us back to these films' lack of identity. It's the biggest crack in the shared universe model. The films, and by affliction their characters, are more defined by the universes they belong to than by anything that may be going on within their own runtime. They're forced within the confines of the world they reside in and become limited by that world's collective vision, regardless of what the individual property may be like. An excellent example of this can be seen if we take a look at DC's Man of Steel. It's clear when DC had begun to market the film that they were trying to emulate the so-called dark and gritty style of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, a series that in no way did them any favors because it was always intended to be a self-contained entity. But if you really take a close look at the Dark Knight series, there's nothing overtly dark and gritty about it. It's simply more grounded in reality, and it takes on the guise of a crime thriller more than anything else. And it's exactly here where studios and most audiences misunderstood exactly what it was that made those films great. The Dark Knight trilogy wasn't great because it was dark and gritty. It was great because for the most part it was a series of well-executed films with plots that centered in character drama. And the key in its success as a comic book adaptation is in that the approach that Nolan and his team took when crafting these films fit the property and the character that they were trying to adapt, even if we were to take the oversimplified descriptor of dark and gritty when referring to the Dark Knight films. These are still qualities that are fitting to the Batman mythos. A masked vigilante that stands guard in the night over a city that's overwrought with crime and corruption goes perfectly hand in hand with that tone and style, which is effectively complementary to the identity of that property. Now, this approach may be fitting for a character like Batman, but if given to any other property, the result may not be equally as fitting, and we get And this is why superhero films have such an identity crisis, this black and white misconception that a superhero film can only be either lighthearted or dark in tone, fun or serious, for adults or for kids, is not only a huge oversimplification, it does a huge disservice to the nuances inherent to each individual source material. By wedging these properties within the bounds of either a dark or lighthearted universe, we as an audience are deprived of fully experiencing the one reason that most of us show up to watch in the first place: the characters. Sure, we're given a few epic fight sequences with some witty quips here and there, but it all adds up to a relatively hollow experience that's all spectacle and no substance. Because we rarely get to delve into the core of the characters because they're weighed down by both their shared universe responsibilities and the tonal mandate that each universe demands. And at the end of the day, we're not left with heroes, but with...
I've beaten every single monster I've come up against. I'm the most famous person in all of Greece. I'm an action figure.
And I'm sorry, but character development is non-negotiable, especially in mainstream media. It's not some pretentious notion that professional storytellers and critics believe has to be in a piece of work in order to make it good. It's the lifeblood of a story. But then that brings us to the question: how exactly can these series improve upon their properties and supply their viewers with more than serviceable fare? Well, that question's already kind of been answered. We just needed to be paying attention. In a previous video, my buddy Pat touched upon the concept of film genre, which, to summarize, was developed to better categorize films with similar narrative elements. A film's genre can be based on any number of things, ranging from common settings, themes, moods, and even formats. And by developing these genres, audiences were given a baseline of what they could expect. So if they were to go in to watch a Western film, they could guarantee that there'd be cowboys, shootouts, and some shots of the great American landscape. Consequently, this also gave storytellers the ability to play with audience expectations, and develop new methods and tools to keep viewers on their toes, adding more nuance to the genre for the next one to come along and tackle it. I've already touched upon how Nolan succeeded in formatting his Dark Knight trilogy as a crime thriller, and out of the more highly regarded superhero films, we can already observe a few that have taken elements from a specific genre. And I think no film has been able to pull this off better than James Mangold's Logan. The character of Wolverine has had a long and storied past, one that many can say has been ripe with tragedy. However, throughout the span of an almost 45-year existence, several elements of the character have remained the same. He's a gruff, anti-hero type with a temper. While he's often part of other teams, he's always identified as more of a loner. He has a wicked violent streak, and in spite of it all, he remains morally good. This is who Wolverine is. But these are also very clear characteristics of a Western hero. This was something that director James Mangold recognized from the beginning as he took on the task of drafting the story for Logan. He's even openly admitted that he largely drew inspiration from 1953's Shane, a film that's not so subtly referenced in the film itself.
Why, Shane?
Man has to be what he is, Joni. Can't break the mold. I tried it and it didn't work for me.
In connecting the threads between genre and character, Mangold was able to craft a unique story fitting to its title character, and may have given the world the most satisfying send-off to a hero ever. In Logan, it's the character that dictates the tone and style of the film, not the other way around. Superheroes as they exist in comics are complex characters, with both light and darkness to them. It's what makes them compelling. The challenge when adapting them to film lies in the fact that what's presented on screen is going to be considered the definitive version of the character. That is, until the series is rebooted about 2 years later. Twice. But by anchoring the characters into a genre that's fitting to their source material, not only do we get a tone and style that fits the character, but we get a chance to delve into the characters because that genre allows it, and we get to see a vision of the characters that isn't so one-dimensional. All we need to do is recognize what these characters are beyond the mask. A geek, a detective, a goofball, a lone hero. So what else are they?